Today we're going to be making a cast iron seared pork loin. We're going to cut a pocket into the side of the pork loin. We're going to stuff it with Boursin cheese. We're going to be incorporating Romanesco. Romanesco has been noted to be grown as far back as the 16th century, back in Italy. It's not broccoli and it's not cauliflower, so it's kind of a cross between the two, but it has a much more delicate flavor profile than cauliflower, and it's a little bit crispier than cauliflower as well. So we're going to oven roast that until it's nice and tender. So just like always, the recipe will be included with a QR code at the top. That'll take you straight to this video. An orange is going to be included. Some Romanesco florets. A toothpick. A pork loin that is about 8 ounces. Some Mediterranean couscous. So Mediterranean couscous is a type of pasta. This is the smaller version. There's a larger version which is called Israeli couscous. A stock reduction that has red wine in there, some Boursin cheese, kosher salt, because again, kosher salt disperses more evenly when you're cooking liquids and things like that, pure ground black pepper, extra virgin olive oil, some dried cherries, a little bit of parsley, and a rosemary skewer. So once again, we're going to get our prep done before we put any proteins onto the board like the pork loin. So the first thing we're going to do is get supremes out of this orange. So we're gonna do what we call a top and tail. So we're gonna take the bottom and the top off. Then what you wanna do is go down the edge and remove all the external portions. So this is the peel, and then this is what's called the pith, the P-I-T-H. The pith is very bitter. So what you wanna do is as you're going down and around the orange, is kind of curve your knife so you get that curvature of the orange, and remove the peel and the pith. Now once you have it like this and you remove the peel and the pith, you'll have the membranes that separate each segment. So what you want to do is find one of the membranes and just follow it along towards the center. And there's 2 ways you can do this. You can actually curve your knife and push out against the next membrane, or you can actually follow that one in and you'll get a segment. So by curving out, what I'm talking about is just going like this, pushing against the following membrane, and it'll just pop out. So push in, pop out. Push in, pop out. So now once you have it like this, we don't want to waste any of that juice, so we're just going to squeeze some of that juice into a small sauce pot that we're going to add our stock reduction to later on. And now with these, you want to make sure there's no seeds in them, so we're just going to separate them, and you can kind of trim them up as you are going through them. If there's any little pith segments on there. So what we're going to do is save a couple of these for presentation, and the rest we're just going to chop up for the sauce. So in that sauce pot, we have the juice and half of the orange that we chopped up. We're going to add our stock reduction that has red wine in it as well. And we're going to set that aside until we're ready to heat that up. Now for the Romanesco. Depending on the size of the Romanesco, you want them all to be the same size. So you can see that this one is a little bit smaller than this one here. So we want to achieve this size with all the Romanesco that we have. So this is about the same size for that one, but these larger heads, we're just going to split in half. And then we're going to toss them with extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of kosher salt, and some pure ground black pepper. We're going to coat those nice and even with that olive oil, and then we're going to place them on a baking pan and put them in the oven until they're nice and tender. So these are the dried cherries, and we're just going to run a knife through them to kind of chop them up, get them into smaller pieces. This is going to be put into the Mediterranean couscous. So there we have our cherries. Our couscous is going to be poured into the bowl. We're not going to season it yet or put any other ingredients in there. We have some water here. We're just going to fill the couscous with the hot water just enough to cover it. then we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap and let it sit for 5 minutes. While the couscous is cooking, we're gonna pull off these parsley tops and we're gonna chop those so that we can add it to the couscous once we're seasoning it and ready for plate up. So you just wanna pull the bottom stems off. And then just chop it with your knife. So again, when I'm chopping, I go to my second set of knuckles. So you have your first set here, your second set here. Basically, they go down to the board together. I never lift the knife higher than my knuckles, so I'm not gonna cut my finger. So put it right up against it, put the tip down to the board, and do a slicing action. And like I did in one of the last videos, if you wanted to, you could put your hand on top of the blade and do more of a chopping action. And we're gonna set that parsley aside for later. The last thing we're going to prep for the sauce is going to be the rosemary. So you just pull it off like that and then take off the top needles. And then do the same thing that you did with the parsley. And this rosemary, you're really going to have to mince it really fine until it's almost a powder. So keep getting it back into a circle and just keep mincing. Now this is minced real fine. We're gonna take all that rosemary and put it into our sauce. So the last task on the cutting board is going to be the pork loin. So we're gonna remove the pork loin. And you can trim off some of this fat cap if you'd like to. I actually enjoy it, so I'm gonna leave it on there. But what you wanna do is find the bottom side of the pork. So fat cap is gonna be on the top, and then on the bottom, we're gonna cut the incision. So what we're going to do is when we go in, we're gonna go in kind of towards this end here. And then we're gonna slowly work our knife around so that way we're creating that pocket. So we're gonna go in this way and just kind of move our knife around on the inside, keeping the area the same as far as where the pocket was initially made. So now we've created a pocket that goes all the way up to here and all the way down to here. So all we're going to do is place the mixture into that opening and fill the opening. Now the Boursin cheese mixture is inside the pork. We're going to take this toothpick and just kind of thread it back and forth across the opening and seal in that Boursin cheese. At this point, we're going to season it pretty heavily on the outside. So we have salt, and black pepper. And now it's ready for the cast iron pan. So here we have our cast iron pan. It's nice and hot. I brushed a little bit of oil onto it. If you don't have a cast iron pan, you can choose to grill it, or you can just sear it in a pan with a little bit of oil. So make sure you sear it on both sides. So we're going to put our pork right there and get some nice caramelization on the other side. So we'll check this and see how our sear's coming along. So it's nice and even and golden brown. I'll flip it over and get a nice sear on the other side. While the pork is finishing searing on the other side, I pulled out the Romanesco. So the Romanesco, you can see, is nice and tender, as well as nice and roasted. It's got some good caramelization notes on there. So it's nice and seared on the other side now. And we're gonna put it on a baking sheet. I put a little bit of oil on the baking sheet just so it doesn't stick. And we're gonna finish cooking that in the oven. And you want an internal temperature of about 140 to 145. It's just gonna have a little bit of pink in there. If you're testing the temperature by using your touch, you just gotta keep in mind that there's Boursin cheese in the center, so it's gonna feel softer. If you're using a digital thermometer, just make sure that you're hitting the pork and not the stuffing. So again, you want a temperature of about 140 to 145. So we have a clean cutting board now that we're going to use for the carving of the pork right before we plate it up. But we're gonna go on to the couscous next. So it's been sitting for about 5 minutes. We're gonna unwrap it. And then we're just gonna take a fork and fluff the couscous. And then we're also gonna add the chopped parsley that we did. a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of kosher salt, and some pure ground black pepper. And we're gonna give that a good mix. So the first thing we're going to do is take our couscous and make a little mound. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be putting some of these roasted vegetables on top of it. Then we have some leftover orange segments from the other half of the orange. And then the pork you don't have to slice, but I am going to slice it. Either way, just make sure you take out that toothpick that you inserted to seal up where you cut. And the final step is that sauce that we had, a little bit of rosemary, some chopped orange segments, and then that red wine reduction.